Hi Ammar, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Three races, 3 weekends in a row. We get a little bit of a break before we head out to Miami. I couldn't be better.
Yeah. That's true. But we do have the small matter of talking about Saudi
We
Arabia.
do, don't we?
Yeah, only small. So this was a weekend in which I think, on pace, the third fastest driver of the top three managed to win the race,
Oof.
and a lot of it is going to revolve around that penalty that was awarded into turn one.
Wait, are you sure you're allowed to talk about this? You won't get penalized or anything, or like social media won't make it look bad, or just asking, man.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe we just shouldn't talk about it.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying, like, God forbid you talk about racing. I mean, good God, like, come on, Shez.
Oh
You
my
can you do
god.
that? Are you sure?
Well, listen, all I'm going to say is I'm going to try and keep it clean,
Oof,
and hopefully we don't get
that'd be nice.
penalised further uh, than what we have already. But we are going to have to get into it because it seemed
Yes,
to
we
be the
are.
most important part of that race, and I think the result ultimately hinged on that penalty. So the first question to get out of the way is: was it a penalty? Should Max Verstappen have been penalised 5 seconds
Yeah.
for what happened in turn one? Amar, go.
Yeah, this is very simple, Chez. The answer is yes. It's as simple as it can be. I think we're all getting caught up in the narrative of everything, but the reality is, Oscar beat Max off the line. He had the better start. He had the corner. He got there first, and they were wheel to wheel, and Max went off track. It's as simple as that. This is not a macro analysis on Max Verstappen's race or him as a racing driver or him as one of the greatest of all times. He lost that corner. God forbid that ever happens. Like that should never happen, right? These guys don't make mistakes at all. Like why do we have to act all hysterical about it? He lost that corner. It was a plain and simple, straightforward penalty. 5 seconds is fine, maybe 10 seconds, but really 5 seconds is fine.
But what about Mexico 2024? This is the one that I keep seeing in my socials feed.
Yeah.
Lando Norris goes around the outside of Max Verstappen into turn four in Mexico, uh, goes off track, joins ahead of Max, and is allowed to keep that position. The argument at that point being that, well, Lando got to the apex first, which is how the racing rules have been guidelined for the stewards to interpret for us. So
I
so
mean,
why
that
so
that's
why shouldn't the same thing apply here?
yeah, no, that's fair. But again, we can't compare tracks to each other. Every track is different. Every turn is different. And by the way, and I know all of you Maxeratis will come after me for this, but Oscar was there first. It's as simple as that. He was there first. It's plain and simple. Your guy got beat on this occasion. It is what it is. Oscar was there first. There's nothing to do after that. So I don't care what other track you bring any explanations from. Oscar was there first. Now you can do all these cheeky printouts and freeze time and make sure what Christian Horner is doing, which is sort of like, gaslighting everyone and bringing out printouts in the age of digital media and us using iPads. Oh, good God. I mean, that is
Amar, I
nothing.
just want to interrupt you for a second though. That printout did show that Max Verstappen was ahead.
Yes,
So you're
but
saying
that was a
that
little bit after though. Like he conveniently printed out something that was like I guess 2 seconds later, which normally 2 seconds is nothing, but this is an eternity in Formula One. So I get it. Like I'm not here to buy that. Okay, Christian, go and by the way, Christian Horner. I mean, I'm tired. Shaz. You know what? We're gonna do this right now. I am tired of Red Bull lighting up drama each and every weekend only for their driver to tell us that, oh, I don't want to say anything because it'll get blown up in social media. Well, good God, it's your freaking team that's doing it. Chess, top three things that Red Bull have done in this triple header. Number one, replace Liam Lawson with Yuki Tsunoda to basically CYA, literally cover their own asses because they can't improve the car. So they sacked that poor guy. They put Yuki in there when they shouldn't have done. Number two, Shez, this stupid thing that Christian Horner is doing, which is coming out with printouts at the end of the race, all complaining. I mean, act like you've been there, Christian Horner. You've won 4 championships with the driver. You lost that race on that turn. It is what it is. Just take the L and move on. You don't need to act all crybaby after this, coming out with printouts. By the way, printouts sponsored by HP, Ferrari team, so Ferrari's in the mix there. but you don't have to do that. Like, that is crazy. And number one, Helmut Marko, the guy who says all sorts of BS in the media, and then Max gets asked a question. He doesn't want to answer a simple question correctly before the race, right? Question about his future. He got very dicey there with David Crawford. It was a perfectly fine question. And then after the race, he doesn't want to say anything about that penalty, as if, my goodness, like, Max couldn't do anything wrong, right? We are 8 days removed from praising him in Suzuka. Then we have a dud in Bahrain. Then there's an emergency meeting. I mean, good God, the only thing I agree with on Helmut Marko, and this is my third thing, Shez, is he said he would like Sebastian Vettel to take over from him after he left. And I say to that, it couldn't come soon enough. But back to what you're talking about, that printout that Christian Horner showed up and show out with at the end of the race, that was not relevant. That is him coming up with a narrative. He wants to show that he loves Max so much and he doesn't want to lose Max. That's why he's doing that. Plain and simple, nothing more than that.
Yeah, he's done it before. In fact, that Mexico 2024 incident, he did the same thing at that point. And a lot of people out there will say, well, why is it that Max is the one that always gets penalised when these things happen? I think it's important just to understand why the stewards made the decision that they made. The first thing about this is that get to the apex first rule, although it's still there in principle, there was an adjustment to it in the guidelines that the stewards issued at the beginning of this year after consultation with the drivers at the end of last year. You remember that after Austin and then again after Mexico, all the drivers sat down and they said, look, we also don't really like the fact that Max basically just dive bombs, lifts his foot off the brake just to make sure that he's at the apex first. So there was an adjustment to the rules. Just to be fully clear, I've always said I don't particularly love that form of driving. I don't like the way that Max does that, but it's very, very clever, isn't it? It is very, very clever to know that the guidelines say all you got to do is, whether you're on the inside or the outside, as the attacker, you just need to, or the defender, you just need to get to the apex first. And then whether you run wide, whether you run the other guy wide, you're still entitled to that corner. But that is what has changed. So first of all, I agree with you that I don't think that Oscar Piastri was second to the apex. I don't think that Max got to the apex first. That's a really roundabout way of saying that. But second, even if he had been, the stewards intimated, because they couldn't tell us what they saw, but they intimated that in the telemetry they had, that Max came off the brakes earlier than he should have, and that they, in their view, didn't think that he was going to make the corner. That's what's been adjusted, that you have to still be able to make the corner. And it was adjudged that Max wasn't going to be able to make that corner. Now, you can call that whichever way you want to. And unfortunately, I wanted to be able to show you that telemetry, but it wasn't available. So I couldn't actually look at it. But I don't have any reason to think that the stewards would lie about it. That the main reason for saying that is because Red Bull would have the same telemetry in front of them, and if that was what was contentious, then they would immediately say, well, actually, no, the telemetry doesn't show that. And there was no point in any of their argument, or certainly the argument that Christian Horner made, that suggested that he had any different telemetry that showed that Max would have made the corner. So I think we can all agree that he wouldn't have made the corner. That was the reason for that, for that judgment by the stewards to give a penalty. Personally, Ammar, if I'm honest, I quite like that he got it. The reason being that the fact that you can basically go, right, it doesn't matter whether I'm defending, attacking, whatever, all I got to do is get to the apex. It doesn't even matter if I stay on the track. That form of racing, that's not interesting to me. It's not. I don't think it's particularly fun to watch. And all it does is that it kills the contest dead there. And then you know that you're just going to have a fight in the steward's room afterwards, and then a week-long chat on Twitter. And we'll continue to do videos like this where we have to talk about why it was a penalty. We'll trot out the same racing rules that have been trotted out every single time. I don't want that. I want to see a battle that goes on for more than one corner, and that I think is what the stewards had wanted as well. None of this is perfect, but this is probably the best that you're going to get from the guidelines and the rules as they're currently written.
Shez,
Go on.
this if this was not a penalty, this would be even a bigger deal, because then what is, right? And sometimes,
Well,
we
Ammar,
can
sorry, I don't want to
go
interrupt you
ahead,
again,
go ahead,
but
go ahead.
that's the problem, is that when it has happened in the past, it hasn't been penalised. You think
Yeah,
back
correct.
to Brazil,
Exactly.
2021, turn 4. It's always at turn 4, isn't it? Again, same thing happened.
Exactly.
Same thing happened there, but Max got away with it. He had, like, everyone could see that he had no intention of making that corner, because he wanted to make sure that he came out of it ahead, and that's why both he and Lewis ended up almost in Argentina to get round that corner. But he was allowed, by the letter of the law, he was allowed to do that, and he wasn't penalised. But now that seems to have been cleared up. So if somebody pushes somebody else off the track or doesn't make the corner, despite getting to the apex first, well, then you're adjudged to not have made that corner. I think that is how I want to see racing going
Yeah.
forwards, and I think a lot of people agree with me, including the stewards.
Well, and even if you saw it in real time, right? You could tell that Max was not going to make that corner. It's as simple as that, right? So yes, you need the data and the telemetry and all of that to make a decision if you're in the steward's room. But I think from a racing fan's perspective, if you are a neutral fan, if you are not a Max fan, or if you are not even a Piastri fan, then you saw that as something where that was clear cut. And to be honest with you, Shez, I've heard a lot about, well, where is he supposed to go? Well, you know what? Just tuck right behind in Oscar. Like, you've lost the corner. You've lost the corner. Tuck right behind him. Live to fight another day. You didn't do that, by the way, Shez. Nobody talks about the fact that they had. I'm not sure if they really had a discussion about it. It seems like they might have thought about it. They should have swapped places, but in swapping places, that would have probably been disadvantages. So they kept the position too, by the way. So they had kept the advantage there, and they had everything in their place. So I do not want to hear a single thing from anyone in Red Bull complaining about anything today. They absolutely had it. They couldn't win the race. No big deal. They came second. It is what it is, guys. Don't act like he DNF'd. Like, I'm just so tired of listening to all of these people like complaining about this stuff, where Max has been on the other end of this. He has maximized the rules. He has worked brilliantly. This time it got to him. And Ches, here's what I'm gonna go into. You're gonna love this, by the way. Last year, fooled around with Lando Norris, right? Because Lando is a little bit of a loose guy, right? Pretty self-deprecative and a little bit fun and all of that. Oscar is none of that. Oscar is none of that. And I watched that post-race press conference where Max was asked directly about what he thought about Oscar, and I saw a chink in the armor there, Shez, because Max did not give praise to Oscar directly. He did give praise to Max, to Oscar, but it wasn't direct. He talked about how Mark Webber is his manager and all of that. And I'm just going to say this. This is way too early, way too soon, right? But I think Oscar got in his head on this occasion. On this occasion.
Yeah, I think there's two points to pick up on what you just said there. I do want to come to them, but there's one last little technicality that we need to get rid of, which is, should Oscar have given some room on the outside? I'm going to very quickly cover that, because I think the way that the stewards looked at this, and the way that I certainly look at it, is because Oscar started second on the grid, got a better start, he was still adjudged to be the attacking driver. So he goes down the inside, gets the apex first, keeps the car under control, and also stays within track limits. So there was no point in which Oscar needed to give any room on the outside as the attacking, overtaking driver. Anyway, that I think covers that. But let's just talk about those two things. So I think the demeanor that Max had immediately as he got out of the car and in the post race, and Oscar's demeanor himself, the way that he reacted to events during the race and after the race, are very, very tightly linked, I think. yes, Max made a point of not really wanting to say anything about the penalty in the post race interview with David Coulthard. You could put that down to him being annoyed about it, but still you could say something. But then he compounded that in the press conference, in the written press afterwards, saying that he was worried that if I say something, I'll get pinged for swearing, because I'm probably going to swear, and second, I'll get penalised for criticising the FIA and their stewards, which is, I think, what he wanted to do. First things first, Ammar, do you think that argument has any kind of validity?
No, it doesn't. It absolutely does not. I think we're again, there is, look, I'm not an FIA supporter by any stretch of the imagination. I do not agree with anything they've done in terms of clamping down the freedom of drivers and speaking their mind. I would much rather hear what they feel versus to kind of have this kind of, questionable, like, what is Max actually thinking kind of thing, because I would have loved to know why he thought it wasn't a penalty. And I think it's the argument is probably played out by his fans and social media anyway. But I don't agree with this narrative. And Shez, I could get the FIA part. What really ticked me off is the social media part, because I really just want to know, like, what is he talking about over there? Like, because he started the weekend being annoyed about being asked about his future. But I would just say that if he is annoyed at anyone, that should be one Helmut Marko, who has been out there saying all these kind of things. He should be annoyed with his own manager, who had this fiery meeting after Bahrain with telling off Helmut Marko, blah, 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 whatever. If you really don't want to see any of that happen, handle it behind the scenes. You don't have to do it at a racetrack where you know there's going to be a camera following you anywhere, if that's the case. So I don't agree with what the social media part of this is. Look, I'm supportive of drivers and what they want to say, how they want to say it. They should express themselves. I love that about them. But Max doing this thing where he's not going to say anything while saying everything just doesn't make sense. To me, it suggests that he is not happy about having lost that corner. And this is the way it's coming out. And that's what it is. And I'm okay with it. If that's what that is it. That's just it. But if you're going to blame social media, start with your own team that are putting out stuff in the social media. That's what they're doing. It's not us, it's them.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was not said was actually far more interesting than what was
Right?
said, wasn't it? But I agree with you. I'd absolutely love to hear Max go on a sweary rant about all of this, and the FIA probably do have some culpability in that. They gave him the perfect excuse for him to give a monosyllabic answer, because it's true. There are rules that say that you're not allowed to swear. If you do, you get a €40,000 fine. You could get a ban if you keep doing it. And you're also now not allowed to criticise the FIA. So all of that stuff that he said was actually true. But it was quite handy because he just didn't want to talk, did he? But I think a lot of that is exactly what you said. I think a lot of his annoyance is because Oscar is not Lando. Lando is someone that he knows is his mate. You can shove him around a little bit on track, and he'll try and come back at him, but he'll still be really apologetic about it afterwards. And he will often berate himself for a lot of the stuff that happens between him and Max. Whereas Oscar is also as monosyllabic as him, but just with a much more chirpy visage to him. He just seems a lot more calm and collected in himself compared to Lando. He can't, and Max, I don't think, can get under his skin as much as he can under Lando. And to compound that, it's not just off track, it's on track as well. The Oscar isn't going to just be like, nah, after you, sir. There was quite a lot of, no, this is my corner. In fact, I thought the most important line that Oscar said immediately after the race was, I went into that corner. If I went into the corner first, I was not going to come out of it second. And that, I thought, was something that I would never hear come out of Lando Norris's mouth. And I still don't think it ever would be. But that kind of marker is the kind of thing that Max, for the last season or two, has not been used to. There is also, just final word on this before we talk a bit more about how the penalty affected the race, I think, is that Max is now in a position where he is behind in the championship. Last season, he could get away with doing some of the stuff that he did because he knew that if both he and Lando ended up in the wall or worse, ultimately he would still have a championship lead, whereas Lando had to be much more cautious. He's not in that position now. He is the one that has to be a little bit more circumspect about the decisions he makes. And it's interesting to see that actually Max, whether he's chasing another driver for the lead of the championship or he's defending a lead in the Drivers' Championship, approaches his racing in exactly the same way. Okay, let's have a little chat about what would have happened. So if he had not had that penalty, who wins that race?
You mean as if he would have stayed ahead
You decide.
without the he I don't know. I don't know. I think it's too close to call. Look, on paper, he finished 2.6 seconds behind Oscar. So you can argue that, yes, without the penalty, he would have finished ahead. But nothing is as simple as that, right? Like, so I think Oscar had a lot of pace in him that he was kind of keeping. And once look, even when the swap didn't happen at the beginning, I could sense that Oscar was kind of staying back and staying low as quickly as much as he could, rather. And I think they were going to undercut at some point. Now it's true, and Oscar said the same, which is that on the mediums, his tires were basically shot. Like he couldn't get any more towards the end of this first stint. And
But
so,
his
excuse me,
tyres
it
were
wouldn't.
shot because he was sitting behind Max Verstappen.
He was sitting behind Max,
Whereas
so
in stint 2 on the hards, he was in clean air. So it's
correct.
not apples with apples, I don't think.
It is an apples, and that's why I'm saying it's really hard. So if they perform the undercut, I mean, look, it wasn't like he was far away either. He was within 2-3 seconds too. So the same could have been said at that point in time. So it's had McLaren undercut in that situation, which I almost certainly think they would have come out in cleaner air. They had the benefit of knowing what the hards were doing because Lando had put those on to begin with. And clearly was the best race tire as far as I could tell from all of the top competitors. So, he could have undercut and he could have come ahead. It's very close to call, Shez. It's not that simple to say that one or the other would have finished. And really, if you're going to go down the path of, well, Max would have gone ahead, then that's fine. But he could have also swapped positions and seen if Red Bull really had the pace to kind of be in there as well. So I don't know. I think it's too close to call, to be honest.
Oh yeah, I think that penalty needed to happen for Oscar to win the race.
Really?
Well, the caveat here being, don't clip that, anyone. I don't know if anyone actually clips our videos, but don't clip that. In that, if Max gets to the corner first and leads out of 2 and 3 on merit, then I think that he probably wins it. The reason for that is Oscar would have still chewed up his tyres. Oscar probably still would have tried to undercut him because his tyres are chewed up. Max would have gone on a bit longer. We saw that his pace at the end of the stint on mediums in clear air was still powerful enough that actually he was only behind by a couple of seconds, notwithstanding the fact that Oscar had a slightly slow stop. You have to take that into account a little bit, but I think with the undercut and then having to serve the penalty, Max still came out only 2.7, I think, behind after the first round of pit stops. So actually, I think if Max had stayed ahead, he would have had been ahead after the first couple of corners. I think he would have stayed ahead after the pit stops, and then he probably would have stayed ahead in the second stint as well. What's more interesting is if the penalty had not been applied, let me say that again. If Max had given back the position and been second in the first stint, then Oscar, I think, probably marginally just wins that race. The reason being that 2.8 seconds he was behind at the end of the second stint, at the end of the race, I think is a little bit misleading because Oscar still, I think, probably had pace in hand. I think he pulled like a 0.7 of a second quicker lap on the penultimate tour, so he still had a bit of pace in those tyres. And he said as well that, look, the car was completely different once I had clear air. It was perfect. and he was able to pull away a little bit. I do think he probably had slightly less pace over a long run than Lando Norris did, but you know,
But Lando was
made
also
his
having a different race
Lando made
too.
his bed ultimately, didn't he?
Yeah.
On
Well,
Saturday. Go on.
this is why I think it's too close to call. And Red Bull made the calculation. I think they knew that 5 second penalty was coming in. They made the calculation of keeping Max ahead in that first stint in the hopes of exactly what you're talking about, which is to try to stay as ahead as possible, clean air, maybe go longer, a la what Charles did. So that could have been the play as well. But I think what is slightly disappointing about these races now is it's becoming a little bit of a clear air, or what Fred Wasser calls a qualifying kind of championship. And I'm hoping that as the season passes, or we change racetracks a little bit, maybe change a venue in Europe, maybe. But I don't think it will
I
be.
don't.
So yeah, it's becoming slightly disappointing. I mean, it's always been there, but for some reason this year it feels more
Well,
prominent than the others.
yeah, but we're now at the end of a rule set.
So everyone's
These
been
guys
merging.
have optimized their
Yeah.
aerodynamic packages, and
Well, not everyone, but
no, but in terms of outwash, they
I know
definitely
what you're
have, right?
doing.
And that's what the rules were specifically set up to stop. That's why the inlets for the Venturis are on the inside of the car, because I think they were hoping that everybody will try and channel as much air as they possibly could into those Venturis. But the only way to do that is to get rid of the tire wake from the front tire. And they've optimized as much as they can to get as much outwash as they can. That outwash is then dirty, horrible air that then affects the car directly behind them. So that, I think they said in 2022 that the new rule set was going to reduce the amount of downforce for the following car by only 20%, when it was like 50 or 70% in 2021. I think we must be back to 2021 sort of levels by
And we
now.
must be.
And the thing that compounds that even more is that Pirelli's tires are so fragile now, especially to heat, and you know that the tire wake, that the wake coming off the car in front is hot, horrible work, turbulent air. Plus, you're sliding around because you're not getting a grip, and those front tires just overheat, and you lose. You lose any semblance of being able to follow. Charles Leclerc said the same thing, that he had a car that he didn't know what to do with in the first stint, and then George Russell pitted, and suddenly he's like, wait, I've got a completely different car underneath me. And that's why when everyone pitted and he was at the front, he was able to extend for as far as he did, because he just had a car that was completely different in clear air. Anyway, aside that was, but I do want to talk about the other McLaren driver, Lando Norris. So Lando had his little crash in Q3 on Saturday, but did he manage to come through the field in majestic style? Was he faultless in wheel-to-wheel battle?
I mean, and faultless, no, but I think I love that you throw that in there. Faultless, no. Effective, yes. I think he got the most that he could. Was there a podium in the mix? Yeah, probably, but I think you have to credit the Ferrari duo for not letting that happen. But look, given where he started, and we just got done talking about, following another car, dirty air, all of the above. It's really hard once you start that far off the grid, because you can have the quickest car, and yet you're gonna, by the time you get to the meaty part of the race, right, where the part where you want to be at the sharp end, you're not there with any of those advantages that you started with. So I think
But
putting all of that into
could Lando have
context.
made it a bit easier for himself? Could he have perhaps understood the game of DRS chicken that's been played for the last 3 seasons in Saudi?
I genuinely
perhaps understood after the first attempt on Lewis Hamilton that perhaps that wasn't the way to do things.
We're gonna nail Nando. Is that what we're doing? Like we're doing that?
Of course we are. Because look,
you are. I'm not going to do that.
Ammar,
But
the reason I'm going to do it, right? The reason I'm going to do it is because there is a stark difference between the way that Lando goes racing and the way that Oscar goes racing, and they're both in the same bloody team. Like, Lando took 3 attempts. He made the same mistake twice against Lewis Hamilton, whereas Oscar, okay, fine, he'd been told by his team, don't do that that nonsense into the final corner. What did Oscar do? He went, all right, I'm going to surprise this guy, and took Lewis into turn 22 with an audacious George Russell move that I don't think anyone saw coming. It was unbelievably good. So you've got Lando on one side, and then you've got Oscar on the other. Look, I'm gonna Hobart the mic for a little bit. Bogart the mic for a second. Look, the reason I think this is important to highlight, right, is because, as I said in our little telemetry video on Saturday, is that you've got two different drivers at McLaren with slightly different strengths, right? You've got Lando Norris, who is arguably the quicker driver, both over a single lap and probably over a stint as well, if we're going to believe the Friday long run pace times. But he has a weakness in wheel-to-wheel battle. He has a weakness in terms of understanding what the game plan is. This is two races in a row where we've had to complain about Lando Norris not understanding what he needs to do when he's attacking a driver in front. He did the same thing against Charles Leclerc in Bahrain. And also, when the pressure is applied mentally by an opposing driver, he wilts. This is demonstrably the case and has been over the last few races of last season. On the other side of the camp, you've got Oscar Piastri, who perhaps doesn't quite have the last nth of speed, although he's pretty damn close to getting there. But he wasn't the quickest McLaren driver in Jeddah, and yet in every other facet of his game, you're not going to knock him, even if you're Max Verstappen mentally. He's not going to give up an inch of space on the racetrack, and he's able to manage a race in a way that you'd expect a driver 5 or 6 seasons into their career to be, not 3 seasons into their career. So you've got these two drivers with strengths that need to be combined, and yet they're not, and they're fighting for a world championship, and they're fighting against a driver who has both of those strengths in spades. That's why he's a generational talent. That's why he is, and by that I mean he is the best driver on the grid right now. But they don't both have the same attributes that they need. And that is where I think there's a wedge to be driven in between the two of them.
I mean, that's a fair point. I'm not so worried about styles and all of that, but I will say that it did annoy me that, I mean, look, I think that Lando didn't really expect Lewis to put up the kind of fight that he did. I thought that he thought that he was just going to...
Why would he not expect Lewis Hamilton to put up a fight?
I don't know, because Lewis Hamilton has been down. Have you heard anything about what Lewis Hamilton has been saying about his racing lately? So I don't know. I mean, look, take what you want. I think that was... When you're starting P10 and you're having to overtake cars over and over again, you're putting out a lot of your car. And I thought that at that point, Lando was just trying to get past Lewis. He thought it would be easy. Now, I can't explain to you why he thought it would be easy, or why he didn't do what exactly what you're saying, which is learn and play the DRS game and kind of do what you need to do to get it done. It seems like a pretty straightforward concept. I'm not here to defend him, but I also can see why that would have been the case, right? Because he's, again, starting in a different place, and the car is not the same by the time you get into these top runners.
What do you mean he's starting in a different place? Like, this is a driver that has been stuck in the midfield for the majority of his career.
And that's where you can place blame.
He's only been at the front for the last 2 seasons, but he has had a car that understands how to, that has the ability to get forward. And you can't use that excuse when the guy in the other car didn't even need to be told.
I'm not using an excuse. I think the criticism is completely fair. I can't even justify what was going on there, because look, a podium finish would have been great, but again, we would have still looked at it as a bit of an L, no, for the weekend. So I think what Lando has to do now, and hopefully there's a little bit of a break now, a week-long break, is he needs to get out of his funk, or for whatever reason he's not able to get the most out of the car. The mistake was made on Saturday, Shez, because he was on course to be on pole, or definitely be on the first row at that point. It looked like, right? And so he could have been there. Now, it could have been in the top 3 anyway at that point. It didn't happen, and I think that this has just pretty much been the worst stretch of his career for a little bit here, and he's just got to get over it, and that's all I can say about it. And you're right, all the criticism is fair. That
He's
this is all told a bad weekend for him because he got overtaken by his teammate in the same car, right? His teammate also did something to Max that he has not done, which is really get in his head. Now, I'm not suggesting that Max is weak or washed or anything, as your friend, my friend of the show, Cameron, has suggested that he's suddenly pointing out that Max didn't do anything in Bahrain and came P2 here is all of a sudden meaning that he's washed. Not at all. But for the first time outside of Charles Leclerc, Max has a competitor that won't bite on his mental tactics, which Max has used to perfection in his career. Hats off to him, right? And so for Lando, this is about a disastrous stretch as there can be. I mean, we're 2 races away, Shez, from him not being backed by McLaren anymore the rest of the way. I'm just saying it.
yeah, Lando, you mean?
What you saying? Yeah, Lando, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, but like I said, it's down to performance ultimately.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what should happen. Zach Brown is still saying they're two number ones. They're great. We're gonna have a fight. But ultimately, the reason that Oscar Piastri is only just in the lead of the drivers right now is because of a half mistake in Australia. But anyway, look,
It's not even his fault, by the way. Yeah.
no, I agree. Look, I think there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we do need to talk about this
Yes,
race.
please, come on.
Most notably Ferrari. But Ammar, I'm going to stop
Yes.
you. Stop. I'm going to stop you right there because we're starting to get on a little bit, and I think this is one that we should save for its own very own episode.
All right.
So why don't we wrap it up there? As usual, please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment. We'll read every single one. We'll reply to as many as we possibly can, and we will see you guys hopefully in the next one.
Later.